The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Council stretched far beyond what human eyes could comprehend. Captain Doyen Park stood in the observation gallery, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as hundreds of alien species took their seats below. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others slithered across specially designed platforms. A few existed as pure energy, their forms shimmering inside containment suits. This was the center of galactic civilization, and humanity had waited 50 years for this moment. Beside him, Dr. Hana Kim adjusted her translator device for the third time. She was nervous, though she tried not to show it. Her research on human cultural achievements had taken 5 years to compile. She believed it would make a difference. Ambassador Taehyung Choi, the senior member of their delegation, stood perfectly still. His face showed nothing, but Doyen had served with him long enough to recognize the tension in his shoulders. The chamber fell silent as Counselor Vrax rose from the central platform. The Veltheron was nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline body refracting light in a display that other species found beautiful. To Doyen, it just looked cold. Vrax's voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into thousands of languages. We gathered today to assess the species known as humans. They have requested membership in our council. We have observed them for 50 of their years. The assessment committee has reached its conclusion. Doyen felt his jaw tighten. Something in Vrax's tone told him this would not go well. Vrax activated a holographic display. Images of Earth appeared, rotating slowly. Then came images of human cities, human technology, human warfare. The counselor's voice took on a lecturing quality, as if he were teaching children about a disappointing science experiment. Humans are physically weak compared to most spacefaring species. Their average lifespan is remarkably short. Their bodies are fragile, requiring specific atmospheric conditions and constant nourishment. They possess only 2 arms, 2 legs, and limited sensory capabilities. By our physical standards, they are quite inferior. Hana shifted beside Doyen. He could hear her breathing quicken. He wanted to reach out to tell her to stay calm, but he remained motionless. Their technology is primitive, Vrax continued. They have only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, and their implementation is inefficient. Their weapon systems are crude, relying on kinetic force and chemical reactions. Their medical science is adequate for their own species, but lacks the sophistication we consider standard. They still suffer from diseases we eliminated millennia ago. The images changed to show human conflicts. Wars throughout history played out on the holographic display. Vrax gestured toward them with what might have been discussed. Most concerning is their emotional instability and propensity for violence. Human history is defined by constant warfare. They fight over resources, over territory, over ideas, over genetic differences so minor they are barely measurable. They have nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. Their literature glorifies conflict. Their entertainment celebrates destruction. They are, in essence, a dangerous and unpredictable species. Doyen's hands remained clasped, but his knuckles had turned white. Around the chamber, alien heads nodded in agreement. Some species he had never seen before were already marking their voting crystals. Hana could not stay silent any longer. She stepped forward, her voice clear despite her anger. Counselor, you ignore our achievements. Human art, music, literature, our capacity for compassion and sacrifice, our ability to adapt and overcome. These things matter. Vrax turned his glittering head toward her. Dr. Kim, your passion demonstrates exactly what concerns us. Emotional outbursts in a diplomatic setting. This lack of control is precisely why humanity is not ready. Not ready? Hana's voice rose. We have explored our solar system. We have built civilizations. We have created beauty and meaning in a universe that offers neither. We have survived ice ages, plagues, asteroids, and our own worst impulses. How is that not ready? Because you barely survived those things, Vrax replied calmly. Advanced species do not merely survive. They thrive. They evolve beyond primitive conflicts. They achieve harmony. Humans remain trapped in patterns of self-destruction, held back by biological and psychological limitations. Ambassador Taehyung finally spoke, his voice measured and diplomatic. Counselor Vrax, with respect, every species in this chamber faced similar challenges. Evolution is a process, not a destination. We ask only for the opportunity to prove ourselves, and we are providing our assessment based on 50 years of observation, Vrax responded. The committee has reviewed all data. Our conclusion is final. Humanity is classified as a subpar species. We recommend restricted contact protocol. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Subpar species. Doyen had heard those words before in his research. It meant humanity would be forbidden from most galactic trade routes. No sharing of advanced technology, no diplomatic recognition. Earth would remain isolated, watching other species advance while humanity struggled alone. "We will now vote," Frax announced. The voting crystals began to glow. Each species registered their decision instantly. The holographic tally appeared above the central platform, numbers climbing rapidly. Doyen watched in silence as the votes came in. 783 species voted to classify humanity as subpar. Only 64 voted against the classification, most of them younger species who had been recently contacted themselves. "The decision is made," Frax declared. "Humanity will remain under observation. We will reassess in 100 of their years. Perhaps by then they will have matured sufficiently." Taehyung bowed slightly, maintaining his diplomatic composure. "The human delegation thanks the Council for their consideration. We respectfully disagree with your assessment, but we will honor your decision." Frax seemed pleased by this response. "Your acceptance shows wisdom. Perhaps there is hope for your species after all. You may petition for limited trade agreements through the appropriate channels. We wish you well in your continued development." The dismissal was clear. The human delegation was expected to leave. Doyen turned toward the exit, his mind racing. 50 years of observation, hundreds of diplomatic meetings, thousands of hours of preparation, all of it dismissed in less than an hour. Humanity had been judged and found wanting. As they walked through the crystalline corridors toward their ship, Hana finally let her anger show. "They did not even listen. They looked at our weapons and our wars and decided we were animals. They ignored everything else. They saw what they wanted to see," Taehyung said quietly. "Fear often looks like superiority." "Fear?" Doyen asked. "What do they have to fear from us?" "That we might succeed despite our limitations," Taehyung replied. "That we might prove their standards are not the only path to greatness. That being physically weak or technologically primitive does not mean being inferior." They reached their ship in silence. As the airlock sealed behind them, alarms began blaring throughout the council station. Emergency broadcasts filled every channel. Doyen rushed to the communication console, translating the urgent messages. Something was happening in the outer rim. Something terrible. The council's emergency session was being called. All available ships were being summoned. Doyen looked at his companions. They had just been declared subpar, dismissed as unworthy of respect. They had no obligation to help the species that had humiliated them, but they were human. And humans had never been very good at walking away from people in need. The emergency broadcasts painted a nightmare in data streams and panicked voices. Doyen stood at the communication console aboard their ship, listening to reports from the Theta sector. Colony after colony had gone silent. The last transmissions showed the same thing, massive swarms of mechanical entities consuming everything in their path. "What are we looking at?" Hana asked, moving to stand beside him. Doyen pulled up the visual feeds. The screens filled with images of billions of small machines, each no larger than a human fist, moving in coordinated waves. They stripped planets down to bedrock, consumed space stations whole, and reduced ships to component atoms. Whatever they touched simply ceased to exist, broken down into raw materials that the swarm used to replicate more of itself. The Devourer Swarm, Taehyung read from the Council's historical database. An ancient weapon. It was supposedly destroyed thousands of years ago. Apparently not, Doyen muttered. He enhanced one of the images, watching as the mechanical insects worked with terrifying efficiency. They are like locusts. They eat everything and make more of themselves. Across the station, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Frax's voice cut through the emergency channels, demanding immediate military response. The elite Veltheran defense fleet was already moving to intercept. These were the Council's most advanced warships, equipped with weapons that could vaporize moons and shields that could withstand stellar radiation. The human delegation watched as the Veltheran fleet engaged the swarm at the edge of the Theta sector. Massive energy beams lanced out, destroying thousands of the mechanical entities. For a moment it seemed like the advanced weapons might be enough. Then the swarm adapted. The individual machines began coordinating their movements, creating interference patterns that deflected the energy weapons. They swarmed over the Veltharan ships, and the advanced shields meant nothing. The machines simply phased through them as if the barriers did not exist. Within minutes, 3 dreadnoughts were consumed, their crews sending final desperate messages before their transmissions cut off. "How is that possible?" Hana whispered. "Those shields are designed to stop anything." "The swarm is not using conventional attacks," Doyen observed. "Look at how they move. They are not breaking through the shields. They are ignoring them completely. Different physics, maybe, or technology so old it predates modern defensive systems." More ships arrived from other Council species. The Crithians sent their biomechanical cruisers. The Solarians deployed their quantum disruptors. The Netheri contributed their reality-warping frigates. Each species brought their most advanced technology, confident that their unique approaches would succeed where others had failed. Each species watched their fleets get consumed within hours. The swarm was growing exponentially. For every machine destroyed, 10 more were created from the debris of fallen ships. The mechanical tide was heading toward populated systems now, and nothing was stopping it. Meanwhile, the human cargo ship Indomitable Spirit floated near the Council station. It was a modest vessel, designed for long-haul freight between Earth's colonies. Its crew of 23 had been waiting to transport the diplomatic delegation home. Now they watched the same emergency broadcasts, seeing the Council's mighty civilizations fall before an enemy they could not comprehend. Jiwan Li, the ship's engineer, sat in her workshop surrounded by holographic displays. She had been analyzing the swarm's behavior for the past 3 hours, ignoring her captain's suggestions that she rest. Her fingers flew across the interface, pulling data from every available source. "They are talking to each other," she said suddenly. Minho Kang, the ship's security chief, looked up from where he was inventorying their weapons. "What?" "The swarm. The individual machines. They coordinate too perfectly to be acting independently. There must be a communication network." Jiwan pulled up movement patterns, highlighting synchronized behaviors across billions of entities. "See, they move as one. That requires constant information sharing." Minho studied the patterns. He had spent 20 years in Earth's military before joining the merchant fleet. He recognized tactical coordination when he saw it. So they have a command structure. Cut off the communication and they stop working together. "In theory," Jiwan agreed, "but I have no idea how they communicate. The Council's scans show nothing on conventional frequencies." On the bridge, Captain Doyen was having a tense conversation with Ambassador Taehyung. The Council had not requested human assistance. Given their recent classification as a subpar species, there was no reason to expect they would. The human delegation could simply return to Earth, leaving the Council to face the consequences of their own arrogance. "We should help," Taehyung said firmly. "They just declared us inferior," Doyen replied. "They told us we are too primitive and violent to join their civilized community. Now that same community is dying and you want to save them?" "Yes." Taehyung's expression remained calm. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because those are living beings facing extinction. Because we are human, and we do not abandon people in need even when they have wronged us." Hana entered the bridge, having overheard the conversation. "He is right. We have to try, not for the Council's sake, for the innocent people in those colonies, for the children and families who did not vote to classify us as subpar." Doyen was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the vote, about Vrax's dismissive tone, about being judged and found wanting. Then he thought about his own daughter back on Earth, and what he would want someone to do if she was in danger. "Get me a communication line to our fleet," he said finally. "All human ships in Council space. We are going to need everyone." Within an hour, the human response was coordinated. There were 17 human vessels within range of the crisis, ranging from small scouts to medium cargo haulers. None of them were warships. None of them had advanced weaponry. By Council standards, they were laughably inadequate. But they came anyway. Jiwan's theory about the swarm's communication network reached every human captain. If they could disrupt the coordination, they might be able to slow the swarm's advance. The problem was figuring out how the machines talk to each other. Dr. Hana proposed bringing the information to the Council scientists, pooling their knowledge. When she made the suggestion through official channels, she was told the Council's experts were busy with real solutions and had no time for input from primitive species. "Then we figure it out ourselves," Jiwan said, anger sharpening her voice. The human ships moved into position near the swarm's advancing edge. They were tiny compared to the Council's dreadnoughts, but they were fast and maneuverable. Minho led a team aboard a derelict Council warship, searching for salvageable technology and survivors. What they found was horror. The swarm had left nothing but empty corridors and stripped bulkheads. But in a sealed emergency shelter, they discovered 3 Veltaran crew members injured but alive. Minho's team got them out, even as the swarm began consuming the wreckage around them. Back on the Indomitable Spirit, Jiwan was working with salvaged Council sensors, trying to detect the swarm's communication method. Hours passed. The swarm consumed 2 more colonies. The Council was evacuating entire systems now, retreating before an enemy they could not fight. Then Jiwan saw it. A pattern in quantum fluctuations, so subtle that Council sensors had classified it as background noise. The swarm was using quantum entanglement to communicate instantaneously across vast distances. It was brilliant and impossibly ancient. "Can we jam it?" Toyon asked. "Maybe," Jiwon replied. "But we would need to generate a massive quantum interference field. Our ships do not have that kind of power. What if we combined our reactor outputs?" Hana suggested. All 17 ships linking their power systems. Jiwon ran the calculations. It could work. For a small area, we could create a dead zone where the swarm cannot coordinate. It was not a solution, but it was something. The human fleet began implementing the plan, even as the Galactic Council continued to lose ships and colonies. Councillor Vrax's broadcasts were becoming increasingly desperate, calling for retreat, for evacuation of core worlds. The Subpar species worked through the night, building a weapon from spare parts and desperation. They were about to discover whether human ingenuity could succeed where advanced technology had failed. Jiwon had not slept in 36 hours. Her workshop aboard the Indomitable Spirit looked like a disaster zone, with cables and salvaged components spread across every surface. She was building something that should not work, using technology she barely understood, to fight an enemy that had defeated civilizations far more advanced than humanity. "This is insane," she muttered, connecting another power relay to the makeshift quantum jammer. "Insane is our specialty," Minho replied from the doorway. He had just returned from another salvage run, this time retrieving components from a destroyed Krithian cruiser. His armor was scorched, and he carried a medical kit containing 2 more alien survivors. Specialist Somin Yoon, their combat medic, took the survivors immediately. She had converted the ship's cargo bay into an emergency medical facility, treating wounded aliens from a dozen different species. None of her medical training had prepared her for treating crystalline beings or creatures with 3 hearts, but she adapted quickly. Humans were good at adapting. "How many survivors now?" Doyen asked, entering the workshop. 23, Somin called from the cargo bay. "Most will live if we can get them to proper medical facilities. Some have injuries I cannot treat with our equipment." Doyen nodded. While the Council's ships had focused on fighting the swarm, the small human vessels had been rescuing survivors from destroyed ships and overrun stations. It was not glamorous work, and it would not stop the Devourer swarm, but it was saving lives. "The jammer is almost ready," Jiwon reported. "I have linked the power cores of all 17 human ships. When we activate it, we should create a quantum interference field about 5,000 kilometers across." "Should?" Doyen raised an eyebrow. "This is experimental technology built from spare parts in less than 2 days," Jiwon said flatly. "Should is the best I can promise. It might work perfectly. It might explode. It might create a localized quantum anomaly that turns us all inside out." "What are the actual odds?" Hana asked, looking up from her analysis station. Jiwon shrugged. 60% chance it works as designed. 30% chance nothing happens. 10% chance of catastrophic failure. "I will take those odds," Doyen decided. "Prepare for activation." Lieutenant Hyunwoo Nam was already in his fighter, one of 3 small craft the human fleet had brought. He had volunteered to fly into the swarm's edge to test the jammer's effectiveness. It was the most dangerous assignment anyone had accepted, and he had been first to raise his hand. "Fighter 1 ready for deployment." Hyunwoo's voice came through the communication system. "Just point me at the angry robot cloud." Commander Yoonji Shin, coordinating the human fleet from her position on the cargo hauler Persistence, ran final system checks. The 17 human ships had formed a network, their reactors synchronized in a configuration no engineer had attempted before. If the power distribution failed, ships would start exploding. If it succeeded, they might actually hurt the swarm. All ships report ready, Yunji announced. Power distribution stable. We are ready to activate on your command, Captain. Doyen looked at the tactical display. The swarm had consumed 6 more systems in the past day. The Council's evacuation efforts were chaotic and incomplete. Millions of beings were dying while the galaxy's most advanced civilizations retreated in confusion. The human fleet was positioned at the edge of the swarm's advance. 17 small ships against billions of mechanical entities. On paper, it was suicide. In reality, it was probably still suicide, but at least they were trying something new. All ships activate quantum jammers, Doyen ordered. Fighter 1, begin your approach. The power cores of 17 ships surged simultaneously. Energy flowed through hastily constructed relays, channeling into the quantum interference generators Ji-Wan had built. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself began to shimmer. The quantum field spread outward from the human fleet, invisible to normal sensors but detectable by the specialized equipment Hana had rigged. It expanded like a bubble, growing to encompass thousands of kilometers. Hyunwoo flew his fighter directly toward the swarm's edge. The mechanical entities ahead of him moved in perfect coordination, adapting to threats before they materialized. He watched his sensors carefully, waiting to see if the jammer would make any difference. He crossed into the quantum interference field, and suddenly everything changed. The swarm's coordination broke. Individual machines began moving erratically, colliding with each other, losing their perfect synchronization. They were still dangerous, still capable of consuming matter, but they were no longer acting as a unified intelligence. "It is working," Hyunwoo shouted. "They are confused. They cannot coordinate." Cheers erupted across the human fleet. Ji-Wan allowed herself a small smile before returning to her monitors. The jammer was working, but it was only creating a small safe zone. The swarm outside the field continued its advance, and the field itself was unstable. "The power drain is too high," Ji-Wan reported. "We can maintain this for maybe 6 hours before our reactors burn out. Then we have 6 hours to figure out the next step," Doyen replied. Hana was already working on that problem. She had been analyzing the swarm's behavior patterns, looking for weaknesses. The quantum communication network was one vulnerability, but there had to be others. Ancient weapons always had flaws. The civilizations that created them made sure of that in case their creations ever turned against them. "There is a central node," Hana announced suddenly. "Look at the data patterns. The swarm has individual units, but they all reference a central intelligence. A mothership, essentially. If we destroy that, the entire swarm should collapse." Minho pulled up the tactical data. "Where is this mothership?" Hana highlighted a position deep within the swarm, surrounded by billions of protective drones. There, at the center of the formation, every communication path leads back to it. "Of course it is in the middle," Minho sighed. "Nothing is ever easy." Yunji studied the formation carefully. No ship could reach that position. The swarm would consume it before it got close. We would need something small and fast, capable of avoiding the drones, and powerful enough to destroy a target that has probably survived for thousands of years. The bridge fell silent as everyone reached the same conclusion. They needed a weapon they did not have, to reach a position they could not access, to destroy a target they barely understood. It was Soman who spoke first, her voice coming from the cargo bay. "What about a bomb?" "We do not have any weapons powerful enough," Doyen said. "Actually, we do," Soman replied. "We just do not call them weapons anymore." She meant the ship's reactor. Every human vessel carried a fusion reactor, a controlled nuclear reaction that provided power for their systems. If that reaction became uncontrolled, the results would be catastrophic. "You want to fly a ship into the swarm's center and detonate our reactor?" Doyen said slowly. "It is the only weapon we have that might destroy the mothership," Soman pointed out. "And a fighter is small enough and fast enough to potentially reach the target." Hyunwoo's voice came through the communication system immediately. "I will do it." "Absolutely not," Doyen replied. "We are not sending anyone on a suicide mission." "Then make it not a suicide mission," Ji-Wan interjected. She was already pulling up schematics, her mind racing. "What if we rig the fighter with an escape pod?" A small one, shielded, launched at the last second before detonation. The explosion would provide cover for the escape. "That is a lot of variables," Minho observed. "The timing would have to be perfect." Humans are good at perfect timing, Hyunwoo said. It is how we survived this long. Do-yoon looked at his crew at the determination in their faces. They had been declared subpar, dismissed as primitive and inferior. Now they were proposing to do what the Council's advanced civilizations could not. Strike at the heart of the Devourer swarm. Start preparations, he ordered. But we do this right. Ji-won, I want that escape pod triple-checked. Hyunwoo, you practice the approach run until you can do it blindfolded. Kunji, coordinate with the fleet. We will need everyone maintaining the quantum field to give him a clear path. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Hana remained on the bridge with Do-yoon. The Council will not believe we can do this, she said quietly. The Council thought we were not worth their time, Do-yoon replied. Let us show them what subpar really means. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the human fleet transmitted their plan. Counselor Vrak stood before the emergency assembly, listening to Captain Do-yoon explain how they intended to convert a fighter's fusion reactor into an improvised nuclear weapon. This is madness, Vrax declared. Nuclear weapons are barbaric. We banned such primitive technology 10,000 years ago. The very suggestion is offensive to civilized species. Then I suppose it is fortunate we are not civilized by your standards, Do-yoon replied coolly. His image on the holographic display showed a man who had not slept in days, covered in grease and exhaustion, but his voice carried absolute conviction. We are subpar, remember? We still use crude technology and chemical reactions. Right now, that crude technology is your only hope. Ambassador Taehyung stood beside Do-yoon in the transmission. His diplomatic training showed in every word. Counselor, we are not asking for permission. We are informing you of our intentions as a courtesy. If you wish to evacuate the remaining systems in the swarm's path, we recommend you begin immediately. We will either succeed or fail within the next 12 hours. Frax wanted to protest further, but he could not. The Council's fleets were shattered. Their advanced weapons had proven useless. Entire civilizations were being consumed while their leaders debated strategies that had already failed. The humans were offering the only plan that showed any promise, no matter how primitive it seemed. Very well, Vrax said stiffly. The Council will observe your attempt. We wish you success, though we doubt your crude approach will succeed where our advanced technology has failed. The transmission ended. Do-yoon turned to look at his crew assembled in the Indomitable Spirit's briefing room. 23 people from Earth, facing a threat that had destroyed thousands of Council warships. The odds were absurd. Everyone understands the plan? Do-yoon asked. Heads nodded around the room. They had gone through it a dozen times, refining every detail, preparing for every contingency they could imagine. Ji-won had spent 18 straight hours modifying Fighter 1. The small craft now carried a fusion reactor rigged to overload on command, an escape pod barely large enough for one person, and enough shielding to hopefully survive long enough to reach the target. She had tested every system 3 times, but she still looked worried. The reactor will go critical 30 seconds after activation, she explained again. That gives Hyunwoo time to aim and launch the escape pod. The explosion should have a yield equivalent to 50 megatons. If the mothership is where Hana thinks it is, that should be enough to destroy it. And if it is not enough, someone asked. Then we all die when the swarm consumes the remaining systems, Minho said bluntly. So it better be enough. Hyunwoo stood near the back of the room, already wearing his flight suit. He had run the approach simulation 47 times. He could navigate through the swarm's chaotic formations even with his eyes closed. His hands were steady, his breathing calm. If he was afraid, he did not show it. The quantum jammers will create a corridor, Yoonji explained, highlighting the tactical display. All 17 ships will focus their fields in a narrow path, leading to the swarm's center. This will create a zone of disruption where the drones cannot coordinate effectively. Hyunwoo will fly through this corridor at maximum speed. The corridor will only last for 6 minutes, Ji-won added. After that, our reactors will be too depleted to maintain the field. 6 minutes to reach the target, activate the reactor, and escape. Soman had prepared the medical bay for casualties. She did not say it out loud, but everyone knew what she was really preparing for. The possibility that Hyunwoo would not make it back. The escape pod was small and lightly shielded. Even if everything went perfectly, his survival was far from guaranteed. Any questions? Do-yoon asked. The room was quiet. Everyone understood their role. The other 16 ships would maintain the quantum field, burning out their reactors to give one fighter a chance to reach the target. It was everything they had gambled on a single desperate strike. Then let us begin, Doyun said. Hyunwoo, may you fly well and come home safe. I will see you all for breakfast, Hyunwoo replied with a grin that did not quite reach his eyes. The human fleet moved into position. 17 ships formed a precise geometric pattern, their power cores already running hot as they prepared to generate the quantum interference field. Fighter 1 launched from the indomitable Spirit, its small frame dwarfed by the massive swarm ahead. Inside the fighter, Hyunwoo ran his final checks. The modified reactor hummed behind him, stable for now but ready to become a devastating weapon. The escape pod was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was there. He would have maybe 3 seconds to get inside and launch before the reactor exploded. All ships ready, Yoonji announced. Quantum field generators charging. Power distribution stable. Hana was monitoring the swarm's movements, tracking the mothership's position. It had not moved in hours, sitting at the center of its protective drones like a spider in a web. That stability would be its downfall. Target confirmed, Hana reported. Sending final coordinates to Fighter 1. Hyunwoo received the data and plotted his approach course. Straight through the heart of the swarm, weaving between drones that would consume him instantly if he made a single mistake. 6 minutes to cover a distance that should take an hour. It was impossible. Fighter 1 ready, he announced. Light the way. The quantum field activated. Power surged through the network of human ships, generating an interference pattern that carved through the swarm like a blade. The corridor appeared on tactical displays, a narrow path of disrupted coordination stretching toward the mothership. Hyunwoo pushed his engines to maximum and entered the swarm. The world became chaos. Drones filled his vision, moving in confused patterns as the quantum field disrupted their coordination. He flew between them, his reflexes pushing human limits as he dodged and weaved through the mechanical tide. His fighter's shields absorbed glancing impacts, but direct contact with any drone would mean instant death. 2 minutes elapsed. Yoonji's voice came through his communicator. Corridor stable. Hyunwoo did not respond. All his focus was on flying. The fighter screamed through the swarm, its engines leaving a trail of superheated particles. Ahead he could see the mothership, a massive construct of ancient technology that dwarfed anything the Council had built. 3 minutes. Corridor beginning to fluctuate. The quantum field was failing faster than predicted. The reactors on the human ships were burning out, unable to sustain the massive power drain. The corridor was narrowing, and drones were starting to coordinate again at its edges. Hyunwoo pushed harder. The fighter's hull began to glow from friction and radiation. Warning alarms screamed in his cockpit, telling him his ship was falling apart. He ignored them all. 4 minutes. Corridor collapsing. He could see the mothership clearly now. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, all geometric precision and ancient purpose. It had survived for thousands of years, waiting in dormant silence until something woke it. Now it would die by human hands. 5 minutes. Field failure imminent. Hyunwoo was close enough. He activated the reactor overload sequence and began his turn toward the escape pod. 30 seconds until detonation. The mothership's defensive systems finally recognized the threat, and smaller drones began converging on his position. He had 20 seconds to get into the pod and launch. The fighter was surrounded now, drones tearing at its hull, consuming it piece by piece. Hyunwoo crawled toward the pod, fighting against momentum and fear. 10 seconds. He reached the pod and pulled himself inside. The hatch sealed. The launch mechanism armed. 5 seconds. He hit the launch button. The pod fired away from the dying fighter, accelerating hard enough to make him black out for a moment. The fusion reactor went critical. The explosion was visible from the Council station, a new star born in the darkness of space. The shockwave expanded outward, vaporizing billions of drones and consuming the ancient mothership in nuclear fire. Across the swarm, every drone suddenly stopped moving. Without the central intelligence coordinating them, they simply shut down, floating dead in space. In his escape pod, Hyunwoo regained consciousness to see the swarm dissolving around him. He had done it. The impossible gambit had worked. Fighter 1 to fleet, he transmitted. Target destroyed. Coming home. I hope someone saved me some breakfast. The Galactic Council chambers were silent when Captain Doyen Park entered 3 days later. The crystalline halls that had once echoed with dismissive judgments now felt subdued, almost humble. Every species present had lost ships and people to the devourer swarm. Every civilization had watched their advanced technology fail while a subpar species succeeded with Primitive weapons and desperate courage. Doyun walked with his crew behind him. Hyunwoo still moved stiffly from his injuries sustained during the escape pod's violent ejection. Jiwon had burns on her hands from emergency repairs during the battle. Soman walked with quiet dignity, despite not sleeping for 72 hours while treating the wounded. They all showed the marks of their ordeal, but they walked with their heads high. Ambassador Taehyung led them to the central platform where Counselor Vrax waited. The Veltheron's crystalline body seemed dimmer than before, as if the light inside him had faded. Around the chamber, representatives from 847 species watched in silence. Vrax spoke first, his voice lacking its previous arrogance. Captain Doyen Park, the Galactic Council recognizes your actions in defeating the Devourer swarm. You and your crew saved billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. We are in your debt. You are welcome, Doyen replied simply. He did not elaborate. The silence stretched. Finally, Vrax continued. The Council has voted to reassess humanity's classification. We acknowledge that our previous evaluation was incomplete and biased. We failed to recognize strengths that do not align with our traditional measurements of advancement. Dr. Hana stepped forward. You judged us by our technology and our physical limitations. You saw our weapons and our conflicts and decided we were dangerous primitives. You never asked what those struggles taught us. And what did they teach you? A Krithian representative asked from the gallery. To adapt, Hana replied. To find solutions when there are no good options. To keep trying when everyone says it is impossible. You evolved past struggle and achieved harmony. That is admirable. But we learned to thrive in struggle. When your advanced technology failed, we knew how to succeed with primitive tools because we never forgot how to be desperate and clever. Counselor Vrax bowed his head slightly. An admission of error that shocked the assembly. Beltherans were known for their pride. To see one acknowledge a mistake so publicly was unprecedented. You are correct, Vrax said. We mistook refinement for superiority. We believed that because we had moved beyond certain technologies and behaviors, those who still used them were inferior. We failed to understand that different paths can lead to equal worth. Minho spoke next, his military background evident in his direct manner. You called us violent. You showed our wars as proof of our barbarism. But violence is not the same as evil. We fight when we must, and we protect even those who have wronged us. Your species had the luxury of forgetting how to fight. We never could. That is not a weakness. The Council acknowledges this truth, another representative spoke. It was one of the species that had voted against humanity's subpar classification. We who remember our own struggles recognized what you are by survivors, builders, protectors. These qualities matter as much as technological advancement. The formal proceedings continued for another hour. The Council presented documentation of humanity's new classification, Strategic Partner Species. It was one of the highest designations available, granted only to civilizations the Council considered essential allies. The vote was unanimous, all 847 species agreeing. But Doyun found himself watching the rescued survivors in the gallery. 23 aliens from a dozen species, beings his crew had pulled from wreckage while the Council's forces retreated. They were alive because humans ignored orders, ignored classifications, and ignored the logical choice to leave them behind. When the formal session ended, Vrax approached the human delegation privately. His crystalline form seemed to pulse with an emotion the translator could not quite capture. I must apologize personally, Vrax said. My prejudice nearly cost the galaxy everything. I looked at your species and saw only what I expected to see. I did not look deeper. Everyone makes that mistake sometimes, Doyen replied. Even humans. We have spent most of our history judging each other by superficial differences, deciding who is worthy and who is not. We are still learning to do better, yet you helped us despite our judgment of you, Vrax observed. Why? Because the people in those colonies did not vote to classify us as subpar, Doyen said. Because children do not deserve to die for their leaders' mistakes. Because we are human and we help people in need. It is what we do. Vrax was quiet for a long moment. Your species will go far in this galaxy. I believe I understand that now. You do not succeed because you are strong or advanced. You succeed because you refuse to give up, even when you should. Especially when we should, Hana corrected with a slight smile. Giving up is logical when the odds are impossible. But humans are not always logical. Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to change. Human engineers were requested by dozens of species, not for their advanced knowledge, but for their creative problem-solving. Human medics were sought after because they could adapt their techniques to unfamiliar biology. Human pilots were recruited because they could fly vessels that more advanced species found too primitive to bother. With the 17 ships that had formed, the quantum jamming network became famous across Council space. Museums requested the indomitable spirit for preservation. Hyunwoo received so many medal offers that he stopped counting. Jiwon was offered positions at a dozen advanced research facilities. They all declined the fame. They returned to Earth to their families and their quiet lives, because they were not heroes seeking glory. They were people who had done what needed to be done, but something had changed in the galaxy's perception of humanity. The question was no longer whether humans were worthy of respect. The question was what other assumptions the Council had made about species they had dismissed as inferior. 6 months later, Captain Doyen stood on Earth watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. Ambassador Taehyung joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea. The Council has invited 12 previously classified subpar species to be reassessed, Taehyung said. They are reevaluating their entire classification system. You started something important. We just did our job, Doyen replied. You did more than that. You proved that their standards were flawed. That being different does not mean being less. That sometimes the species that struggles the most learns the lessons that matter most. Doyen sipped his tea, thinking about the swarm, about the impossible odds, about Hyunwoo flying into certain death because it was the right thing to do. He thought about Jiwon building weapons from spare parts, and Somin treating alien injuries she had never seen before, and every human who had chosen to help instead of walking away. Maybe we are subpar by their standards, he said finally. Maybe we always will be. We will never be as physically strong as some species, or as long-lived as others, or as technologically advanced as the Council's elite. But maybe that is okay. Maybe being subpar just means we have to try harder, and maybe trying harder is what makes us human. Taehyung smiled. The galaxy is learning that lesson now. Other species are asking what they might have overlooked in their own development by chasing perfection. You gave them permission to embrace their own struggles instead of hiding them. Good, Doyen said, because the universe is too big and too strange for any one species to have all the answers. Maybe if we all stop pretending to be perfect, we can start helping each other be better. Above them, ships crossed the sky. Some were human vessels heading to the stars. Others were alien craft coming to Earth, seeking the species that had been classified as subpar and had saved the galaxy anyway. The traffic would only increase as humanity took its place among the stars, not as the strongest or the smartest, but as the species that refused to quit. In the council chambers, Vrex watched the same ships through the vast windows. Beside him, other counselors discussed trade agreements, technology exchanges, and joint military protocols with humanity. The species they had dismissed was now essential to galactic security. Do you regret the classification? A colleague asked Vrax. Every day, the Veltheran replied. But perhaps it was necessary. We needed to see our own prejudice exposed. We needed to learn that our way is not the only way. They taught us humility, the colleague observed. No, Vrax corrected. They taught us that humility is not the same as weakness. They were humble enough to help us despite our arrogance. That took more strength than all our advanced technology combined. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had been declared subpar, and had proven that subpar was more than enough. Now the real work would begin. Building a galaxy where different did not mean inferior, where struggle was recognized as a teacher, and where the species that survived impossible odds were valued for their resilience. The Devourer swarm had been defeated by nuclear weapons and desperate courage. But the real victory was in the minds of 847 species who had learned that their standards were not universal truths. Humanity had passed a test the Council never intended to give. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever.